This week, we've got fantastic content. We just have no idea what order it's going to come in. Although I do know that first, Eric Butash, the director of digital platforms at Innovate EDU, and Mike Klein, professional learning coordinator at the Highlander Institute, are going to be here to talk about how important it is to teach good digital hygiene to the future generations of cybersecurity. In the second, maybe third, fourth segment, we're going to welcome Robert Graham, hopefully CEO of Errata Security, take a deep dive into his tool that he released called RDP Scan. In our third, second, fourth segment, we're going to welcome Dave Busha, the senior security engineer at SaltStack, to talk about how Salt Open and SaltStack Enterprise can help you automate your security infrastructure. In the security news that may come last or second or third, why mobile ad fraud prevention is too good to be true, how police can snoop on McDonald's Wi-Fi and Westfield Wi-Fi customers, which I believe comes from the UK, macOS gatekeeper bypasses, and a crypto miner that keeps coming back. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. NetSparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. NetSparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with their proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email at contact@netsparker.com. Is your IT team ready to face the next implementation or upgrade? Do you have a pool of talented team members who are trained and ready to support your organization's growth? The right IT skills development platform can get you past the IT skills gap. With training content that's so engaging, some even call it binge-worthy learning, your team will watch and learn more with IT Pro TV. Get a free team trial of IT Pro TV today. Visit securityweekly.com/IT Pro TV. Thinkst Canary makes high-fidelity honeypots that set up in minutes and requires no ongoing administration. Attackers moving silently on your network advertise their presence by tripping over them. There's a good reason Thinkst Canaries are deployed and loved by some of the best security teams in the world. They're inexpensive, they're simple, and they work. For more information, go to securityweekly.com/canary or direct message @Thinkst Canary on Twitter.
And welcome to the show. But first, let me introduce you to a man who pushed a release today with Python, and he wasn't even in the bathroom. Mr. Paul Asadori.
Welcome to Paul's Security Weekly. This is episode 606, recorded on May 30th, 2019, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. I would like to welcome our in-studio guest, Mr. Larry Pesce. Is, of course, been here since the beginning. I was just explaining to some of our guests that, like, at one time it was just really Larry and I running the, like, literally running the show.
Everything.
Everything.
You remember those tables in those conference rooms in those secret locations that looked like a Radio Shack threw up on them every week?
Yes. Yeah. It was pretty epic. Now we have, like, people who it's like their careers too, which is pretty. Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
It's their careers to have a Radio Shack throw up on a table every week.
Yes,
or several times a week.
It throws up in a very big space. Actually,
yes.
On the lines remotely, Mr. Joff Thayer is here with us. Joff, welcome.
Hello. It's Thursday evening again. It's good to be here, and I'm so glad you and Larry are back. Last week was so chaotic without you guys.
Hey, it's good to be here. I heard last week was fun though. I feel like I missed out on the fun.
I know.
And I got to introduce Doug. I called him the only man, I think it was in New England, with one testicle or something like that. Anyway, it was fun.
Oh, so it went right off the rails to begin with.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah. It started really, really well, and I couldn't even say my line. I flubbed the line on the intro even better, right? So.
See, Joff, it's not as easy as it looks, is it?
No, it's not. It's not easy being you, Larry.
I think Larry says we make this look easy, which is a really dangerous thing to say right before
before this show.
Before this show, which is going to hopefully be a 4-segment show.
We're going to call this show Epic Train Wreck. There's the title, Johnny. Note that.
So make sure you register for our upcoming webcast with SaltStack, Logarithm, and Domain Tools by going to securityweekly.com/webcast. webcasts. SaltStack in particular is a very interesting one. You should attend that webcast. Again, I really like the folks at SaltStack. I worked with Mayhall at Tenable very closely, who is now at SaltStack. Just fantastic configuration management and security products that they have in open source. And we'll hear more about it on the show, and it's definitely something that you want to check out. Eric and Mike intro. Oh, that I wasn't supposed to read that. Eric Butash, as I said, is the director of digital platforms for Innovate EDU. Eric, welcome.
Thank you.
And you live here in Rhode Island.
I do.
Both you and Mike both live here, not together, but live here in your own homes and
Not
stuff.
born and raised. I moved here about 20 years ago from Pennsylvania.
Gotcha.
So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
And Mike Klein, you are the professional learning coordinator at the Highlander Institute, which doesn't have anything to do with the movie with like the really cool sword and all that stuff, right?
Does it? There can only be one.
There can only be
There can only be one. I got you. Yes. It's been a while since I've seen that movie. Well, welcome to the show and welcome to the studio. It's nice to have you both here. We wanted to talk about, I think we were talking at the Ocean conference, the Cybersecurity Day, and both of you were like, we help people with technology and cybersecurity in our school system. I'm like, well, that's an issue that's near and dear to our heart. Mm-hmm. And since then, what's interesting is we've had like this string of interviews of people. I don't know if you've caught them. You have to go back and watch some of them with people who are doing the same thing that it's in the same space anyhow that right. You guys are in. And we've had a lot of conversations about how we get the youth of today involved in technology, because obviously there's all these really smart people such as yourselves that are working on this problem. It's a huge gap in schools. And I've told our listeners before, right, I walk into my children's classrooms and I see the computers and I'm like, is that the computer for the class? Like, really? Do you need, like, we can donate, like, let's talk, because this is,
right.
It needs to be better. I feel like we're way behind on technology and specifically cybersecurity and education.
Yeah.
So.
Agreed. Yeah, I think the issue, Mike and I actually keynoted recently in Maine. Mm-hmm. I think what we do well is we bridge the gap from you security professionals yourself to the end users, our teachers and our students, right? Because knowing what's happening out in the world is that they need some kind of like someone to filter that down to the level they're at. And so for us, for me as a former tech director for a school system, mm-hmm. I think I can get every teacher's password by just lifting up the keyboard and flipping it over, or opening the door and they're, somewhere.
What was the password in war games?
Pencil.
Right? It was pencil. It was pencil. I was right. It was pencil.
Yeah. So I mean,
I can't remember my wife's
my
anniversary.
Own password, yeah.
No, I can't remember my wife's and my wedding anniversary, but I can remember the slide out was pencil.
Yes. And what year was that movie?
1986.
Six? Was it
486?
Ali Sheedy? Yeah.
Yep.
84.
Yeah.
Ali Sheedy. Anyway.
Yeah. So I mean, for us, it's for me, the pain back in the day was: do you have to reset the passwords again? Do I have to change my password again? Do I have to remember something new? So, and that we're just talking about passwords here. Mm-hmm. We're not even talking about when we get to the point where student data and importing and exporting CSV files into systems and platforms. So, yeah.
1983 war games. 1983.
I thought it was 04. But that's good.
Now that we've done hacker movie trivia, which is awesome, which is something that we do. So why are the school systems so behind? I feel like in curriculum in general, like I'm not exaggerating the issue, like they're behind in technology, and I feel like curriculum in general, right?
Yeah, I think it's been a challenge to figure out how technology should be used most effectively in schools, and I think that's where we kind of come into the conversation. Mm-hmm. And there's a real interest on the side of like folks who are in charge of curriculum, like superintendents and teachers and people like that, to think about how can we use technology to do, to let students learn at their own pace, or to meet them where they are, or to give them something that's more relevant to their own context or something like that. But there's been very little focus on digital privacy and security,
yes.
And especially helping kids and teachers think about what does it mean to put personally identifiable information into these systems and then have them potentially end up online somewhere. And the work that has been done is focused a lot on students and very little on teachers. And when you're asking teachers that don't have the background to do this, because
right.
they came in straight from college into teaching, many of them when computers weren't really a thing in classrooms, it's not something that they're very aware of. And so it's figuring out how do you help teachers understand why this work is important.
That's a good explanation, because I think sometimes we come down hard
right.
or have the appearance of coming down hard on teachers, and That's not what we want to portray, right? Like
Right.
teachers are teaching our children. They're doing a fantastic job for the most part and doing the best with the resources that are available to them, and they work really hard.
Right.
But Mike, what you just said I thought was very interesting is when many of our teachers were in school, even people who've graduated not all that long ago, right? In their elementary school, probably computers weren't like as big a thing as
Right. Novelty.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, the next generation of teachers, though, are the ones really pushing the envelope, who have been born and raised in this. Their first internet access came from a Nintendo DS or whatever, Nintendo at age 2 or 3. And those are our next teachers coming in and asking for more of these online systems. And that's what they're kind of born into.
Yes.
And so what I'm seeing is some of the resistance you would think are from the older, ready-to-retire generation, but it's really the mid-50s, late 40s year-old teachers that are in systems that just have that system overload. Not another platform we're bringing on board.
But they've been teaching for conceivably 20 plus years,
Correct.
right? Without the a lot of heavy emphasis on the technology component.
And there's been
don't fix it. It's not broken.
Right.
And humans are resistant to change.
And I think it's hard for us, like, Larry and I and Joff, right? We've been working in technology for over, 20 years or more. And so for us, like, that's a really sharp contrast to like a field that hasn't,
And for me, I think it's, my first training, I started teaching about 15 years ago. I came in teaching in New York City, in Brooklyn. And the very first training I was sent to before I even was taught how to teach was to use a Palm Pilot to do assessments.
Yeah.
Right. So like this is back in the day when like the promise of technology was coming, but the technology didn't do anything very helpful. And so when you're a teacher and you're being promised all these amazing things that technology is going to do and it doesn't do those things yet, there starts to become some resistance to it. It's like
and
the flavor
in that
of the day.
description, Mike, you very accurately described the Palm Pilot as well.
Yeah.
That's right.
Exactly.
It's an interesting piece of technology history.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
History. Exactly.
Yeah, it's
Wait, I think I still have one at home.
probably.
No, I still have the iPack.
Yeah.
The compact iPack.
Yes, the compact iPack was the
with the sled, so you can add BCMCA wireless adapters.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I
that was
remember
great.
those.
Still have that. I still have it.
I think a lot of classrooms still have some of that technology
That's
too.
I actually saw one for sale on Amazon for about $900 the other day.
Mm-hmm.
Prime, no less.
Connect the BBS. I'm joking.
Right.
I'm going to date myself.
No, but
It's
you
okay.
also, and I think it was you, Eric, that said something interesting earlier that, sometimes the technology is available. Schools have a budget, they go out and they buy a bunch of Chromebooks,
Right.
which I think is great, by the way. But then what do they do with them, right? Like, there's a lot of different phases in this getting our educational system updated, right? It's one thing to have technology. It's another thing to have curriculum. It's another thing to have students that want to do it and teachers that are trained to do it. Like, there's a lot going on here, right?
And there is a bit, we're a small state and we have a lot of school districts. I don't know if you know that living here, but there's a bit of like, I say about 10 years ago, it was like, well, so-and-so did one-to-one rollout with this device. Now we need to, so it's like a tit for tat. Like I want one-to-one, you want one-to-one, which means one device for every kid. And it was the introduction of the netbook. You remember netbooks?
I do, yes.
Another Palm Pilot, but that was just that low-income Atom processor device that hit streets for $3 when the economy was
It was like
tank.
the original Chromebook, really.
For the most part,
right?
yeah. Windows ran on a very Windows XP Lite or something like that.
They were Windows-based,
Yeah.
And you can put Linux on them.
Yeah, you could put Linux on them. Yeah.
I have 3 of them sitting on my desk at home right now.
I made mine a Hackintosh. So
nice.
So I totally converted those things. So I think that was the key, is just getting into the devices, and the kids will figure it out. And then online assessments came in. So state assessments came along through online, and so we need to get devices to do assessments every year for all of our kids.
Right.
Yep.
And that's the piece that's so frustrating is like it came in through this other channel, which meant that teachers now associate it with kids needing to take tests too. So there are all these pieces that are kind of mismatched. And then the other thing is like maybe 10 years ago, there was really a digital divide around who has access to technology. And now it's who has access to teachers that know how to use it well in the classroom.
Yes.
So basically everyone has devices now. It's just a question
Which I
of
think
like,
is a better problem to have to deal with than trying to get the budget to get the technology
Which
in
is
the
fair.
schools, which is probably still the
harder
case
problem
in,
to solve though, right? Like
yeah.
one is a technical problem, the other is a real social problem that you're trying to solve.
True. Yeah, and training at scale is hard. So if you're a parent or a teacher, what's your path to getting teachers to, let's say, be able to teach programming and coding, right? Like today, a lot in elementary schools, which I'm very opinionated in this issue. I think it should be taught in elementary school. I think there should be teachers. I don't think that parents should have to send their children to another program, like other learning facility to learn coding. I think it should be done in elementary school. But how do we get the teachers trained up on this, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so if you think about elementary school teachers teach everything, right? So they teach all the content areas.
Mm-hmm.
And in mathematics, the earliest ways you can get into this are like early versions of algebraic thinking or those kinds of things get you used to thinking about symbolic systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that it's really easy to get kids to learn the basics of code, like even through something like code.org. If
Yep.
you're thinking about like, can you make a grid on the floor and have kids like move forward, move to the side, right? Like things that don't even require computers, right?
I had some of those maths for my kids.
Yeah.
That's
And
a
so,
great
like,
way to start.
those kinds of things become like a really easy way to do it. And I think the other ways to think about it are like there's some really cool ways to integrate the kinds of problem solving you'd need to do to code with engineering. So there's something called like novel engineering, which takes like novels that students are reading in class, and when you get to the problem that the character needs to solve, then you go through the design thinking process of like, how do we solve this problem, right? So it's less about the skills of coding and more about like what it would take to be a thoughtful kind of critical thinker or problem solver.
There's academic research that has proven that telling a story and allowing students to learn coding through telling a story. It's alice.org. I don't know if you're familiar with Alice. It was Randy Pausch's student, right? That developed that. And so I would love to see that more in schools.
Absolutely. So I think that's like a really easy entry point for working with teachers. And I think there are all these cool things, but again, you end up with this thing where like everyone's buying these like individual point solutions for random things like a Sphero or this or that. And not that those things are bad and like in and of themselves, but like it's essentially just buying a one purpose tool to like have someone learn the basics of like some random piece of code.
Right.
Exactly.
And then block-based coding, obviously, is like a really good way to start.
And I'll couple. I know in Rhode Island, there's an initiative called CS for Rhode Island, which is computer science for Rhode Island, which it introduces at a very young age, straight up through 12th grade, that there's at least an element that's geared toward computer science and coding. So it's an initiative that started 2 years ago in the state and has been kind of rolling out across the state too. So
And then I feel like it gets a little better in high school.
Yep.
I feel like there's a lot more programs for folks that want to do technology. And there's the Cyber Patriot program.
Yep.
Right.
And then as you move into the collegiate level, there's the CCDC.
Right,
all the different regions, right, have the CCDC. I feel like it's better. So if you're listening, you've heard us talk about these things kind of individually, but I think in an educational path, right, there's code.org. There's Philip Niedemeyer came on the show a couple of weeks ago and was talking about working with Discovery Education to really, I don't know if you're familiar with his with his work, right? And then as you move through in school, high schools have a lot of really great programs I'm learning. And what I didn't realize was, and this probably isn't specific to Rhode Island, right? But if you are in one school district, if the high school has vocational programs, is that the right word?
Right.
You can go to another high school to take advantage of those programs.
If you can get a seat.
If you
so there's some real equity issues around that for sure, but I think that there is some kind of element of choice. But the sending and receiving district both need to be okay, I think, with that process. And there are only so many seats. So like I can speak about like I do coaching and work in both Providence and Barrington, two very different worlds in terms of education systems and resources and student support
and taxes
and all those kinds of things
and spend per student.
Yeah, exactly. And so in Barrington, which is an amazing school district, and as Providence is in some elements too, they have all these seats at the high school, and most of them are taken by students in Barrington. There are a couple left over for people that want to come in from other places.
Sure.
But essentially, like, how many seats do you have in a classroom, and how many are going to be filled by students from that district? And I think that's the biggest challenge is really, like, how do we make sure that it's not just, to maybe be a little bit too blunt about it, like, wealthier, whiter students that have access to these programs.
I want to see everyone have the opportunity, right? Regardless of background, everyone should have the opportunity to learn.
Right.
In this case, technology. I mean, there's other programs in schools, right, that aren't necessarily technology related, which are important as well. I think there's a big skills gap in a lot of the trades, electrician, plumber, HVAC, and those are very important roles. And I think roles are going to be increasingly more technical as time goes on, which we absolutely need.
And I think, not to pivot too much, but like from the conversation about coding itself to then thinking about privacy and security, like even if you're not going to become a developer, you still need to know good digital hygiene because everyone has accounts.
Everyone's going to have to learn that. You're right, Mike.
And so helping them think about those pieces at the kind of the at scale piece that you were describing before, like not just the computer science teachers need to know that, every teacher needs to understand that.
Well, in terms of, the privacy piece, we talked a little about passwords. I really think the password is finally on the way out. I think there are some really truly innovative and solutions that could actually solve the problem, feasible solutions. for getting rid of the password today.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think one challenge with technology is the adoption is about 20 years later than every other industry. And so it's probably not going to come to education for a while, but absolutely. I think there's some really interesting ways to approach that.
Yeah.
It takes one parent just to come to a school board meeting and just squash the entire initiative of using other ways of authenticating.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, even I can tell of some communities here when wireless was being rolled out in the state of Rhode Island across every classroom, we had a few communities that had a halt on the program because of all the RF through their child and sitting below the access point, put the project on hold.
Is there valid research that is a health?
I don't know.
I'm not an expert in that, but in the same sense, I have no idea.
Yeah.
But
It's interesting.
I'm aware of that, Paul. I've actually dealt that in the university. We had the same. So you might have too, Paul, for that matter. We had the same issue about the time Wi-Fi was really getting strong and introduced in universities. We had a number of faculty raise that concern, and there was some studies done. I can't quote specifics, but it was largely debunked from my memory. But this is, we are talking, over 10 years ago now, 10, 12 years ago. But
Yep. Now, if you think about it logically, and I haven't seen any of the studies, I mean, you're taking like a device like this that has Wi-Fi in it and operating BGN 2.4 gigahertz, and you're putting it right next to your head to talk to it on the phone.
It also has Bluetooth at the same frequency
ranges. 2.4 gigahertz frequency ranges is also the same frequency ranges that your microwave oven uses to bounce into your food to excite the water molecules to bounce together to create friction. So you're effectively using a little low-powered microwave oven right next to your head.
Yeah.
I know, and when you touch the dish when it comes out of the microwave, it mega hurts.
And I think the concern now is
one of my dad jokes for the evening.
Yeah. Well played. I think one of the bigger concerns now, even more than that, is really about screen time and about the extent to which students are becoming kind of pulled into and addicted to different technologies, and to what extent should schools reinforce or pull in some of those same techniques, which used to be called gamification a few years ago, but is essentially like how much technology is too much technology, or when does it make sense?
Yeah, I mean,
there's great ways to limit, and not just, I don't want to say limit, it's the wrong word. The technology today that I think helps improve the student's life really is more around kind of more gamification, right? Like, oh, you've been on your tablet for an hour straight watching videos. Okay, your time's up. Now you have to go in this other app and you've got to read, for 20 minutes if you want to earn back any time.
Right.
Or it turns off and you got to go do your chores and come back. There's a lot of great technology and software around that today.
But if you're a parent who's in a school where students are on devices every single period as a required part of their curriculum, you get put in a strange place about like, how much do I believe this is actually the right thing for my kid? I don't have control over that anymore.
Yeah, we had a weird one that we've addressed for this summer. Last summer, we tried to get the kids outside as much as humanly possible. When it was a nice day out, just go play outside. And then after about 3 or 4 days, it became, on a weekend, it was, Daddy, we want to go inside and use our iPads. I'm like, no, you're not going inside. It's a nice day out. Go play in the yard. Go out in the woods. We have a wooded lot. And like, well, can we go get our iPads and bring them outside? And it became now of a, all right, everybody outside. And now it's like, okay, we're going to bring our iPads with us and we're going to go watch some YouTube while we're sitting outside in the lawn chair. And I'm like, nope, this summer outside is an iPad-free zone unless you're doing something creative like a video or you're videoing some of your play to share with a friend or something like that. If it's not creative, it stays inside. And
that's the pedagogy shift we're trying to push for, right? Is like actually creation, not just consumption, right? So can you actually go and make and do and create something?
I'm really impressed that he said pedagogy.
Thanks.
That's a really big word for you, Joff. I'm impressed.
It is a learning tool. There's a lot of great coding apps. There's a lot of my middle son has this really cool thing. I forget the name of it. You put the iPad in it. It's got like a mirror over the camera. Osmo, right? And you can draw and stuff. And I've like done it with him. I'm like, dude, this is like I'm having fun doing this. Like this is really cool.
Yeah, there's some incredible stuff out there. I mean, I was visiting a school last week where the students were creating these geometric shapes and trying to match them and do this pattern and problem solving work, and the computer could give them immediate feedback. I mean, like that's ultimately what we want, is like a computer that can amplify the number of teachers in the room, right?
But I'm a father of 2 kids that play Fortnite.
Yes.
And I have to tell you, when I sit back and watch them from a year ago to today, and the reasoning and the way they kind of think through the game and coordinate and work with teams,
Oh, yeah.
I am blown away. It's still, I mean, we restrict it to an hour, so they have an hour.
You do have to. I
they're-
agree,
and they're
Eric.
like,
you have to limit.
But my friends are on there. I don't care what your friends are doing.
No, yeah.
You have 1 hour, and then let's go out and play whatever, lacrosse
Yeah.
or whatever. Do
Yeah,
your
well,
thing.
that's the one that my parents used to say to me. If your friends told you to go off and jump a bridge, go
That's-
jump off a bridge, right?
My kids are probably listening right now. Said I do the same thing.
Yeah.
Your friends
Right.
jump on the bridge, you go.
Yeah.
But even still, even in some of those games there where they can customize, where they're not scaling up, they're buying something to personalize themselves in that environment, but then really reasoning and how they react to different environments. That game.
It's why I don't like to use, and I think my wife and I used to differ on this. I think we're more on the same page. I don't like to use taking away technology as punishment for the kids. For
Yep.
just the reason, one reason is what Eric is saying, right? Like, some games are important for reason. If you ever played the Lego games, my younger kids,
Yeah.
they love the Lego games. And my brain's kind of going a mile a minute, like problem solving
Right.
in the game. I'm like, this is really, really good and healthy in a certain respect, right? I think you do have to limit because it can become unhealthy.
Right. Agreed. That's a fine line you got to run,
Yeah.
especially with kids.
Oh man, Paul, I can't wait till your kid's like 17, and I want to revisit that discussion if I'm still alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
because let me tell you, that becomes the ultimate parent weapon when they get older.
No, I agree. And right now, I think they don't play enough video games. Like, they're kind of getting into trouble around the house and running around and torturing his brother. I'm like, will you just sit and play video games for a half an hour or even an hour?
Yeah.
And he won't, right? My oldest one, he's like in the backyard raking and stuff. So it's the opposite with my oldest son right now. Job is, I wish he would spend more time playing video games because a lot of times he's just outside getting into trouble or torturing his brothers.
Does he want to come to my house and rake some stuff? Because I'll totally pay him.
Well, he does because a lot of times he's bored raking our yard, so he's sneaks into the back parts of the neighbor's yard and he's raking back there. I'm like, dude, no, rake our yard.
That's entrepreneurship, man.
That is.
Right? Yeah, because then he's gonna send them a bill.
Yeah, exactly.
No, for sure.
So, resources for parents here, locally or nationally or even globally, right? On the topics that we talked about, what are some good resources?
I can say from so my background too is there's a resource called Common Sense Media. If you're familiar with them, they do a lot of ratings on the games out there and the videos. But they also have a whole area for parents around screen time and time to have the talk. But it's really
Common Sense Media. I've heard of that before.
Yeah, Common Sense Media. They're a free resource. They're a nonprofit out in D.C.
Mm-hmm.
I equate them to kind of the Mr. Yuck stickers from way back yonder.
Sure.
Yeah. Under your brain on drugs with the pan.
It helps parents identify good apps versus bad apps.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of resources on there for parents to really lock down. And they have some really good little PSAs with Will Ferrell, which are great.
Yeah, nice.
where sometimes the problem, the inherent things were happening is maybe I'm texting at the dinner table and they're watching me text at the dinner table, and that's being broadcasted to my kids who don't have phones yet, but someday will have it and start thinking that's the right way.
Right.
They get to that whole reasoning that you're part of the problem too, or part of the solution as well as a parent.
Yep.
So
and Common Sense Media also has something for teachers where you can actually look at an app and see what are the two pieces, how pedagogically sound is it, and then also how private and secure is it, what data does it send back and forth, which I think for teachers kind of nudges them to think about that more. They also have lesson plans around digital privacy and security. And I think Electronic Frontier Foundation has amazing stuff too in their security toolkit, I think it's called, where they have the lessons on diceware, how do you make a strong password, or those kinds of things that make it a little bit more enjoyable and gamify those things for teachers, so they can kind of get into that process too. Yeah, it's a really, really strong program. And they actually ERDI has their own, or EDRI has their own 15-page comic book that explains privacy and security stuff and with action figures and stuff like that.
Yeah, because it's sometimes difficult to get your children who are under the age of 10, right, to choose a good password. I mean, that's really when I thought about how flawed the password was when I had to start explaining it to my kids, the difference between a good and a bad. I'm like, wow, this is really really flawed.
I mean, you have lots of school districts where students' usernames are their student ID, which is very
And
problematic.
they foster
and
that
the password,
yes,
and the password is
Right.
default password.
Yep.
And so it just ends up being something where we're building that in, and the kids are just used to that being okay. And then Google has some really good stuff too. It's great on the security side, as is Google, and terrible on the privacy side. So it's very good at explaining the difference between those two things, but it'll never talk to you about like how they track ads and stuff like that. Right.
Awesome. Well, Mike and Eric, thank you for coming down to the studio.
Yeah,
it's
thank
nice seeing you folks. Well, come back anytime. I mean, these are issues we talk about
For sure.
all the time, so feel free to visit, and hope to see you in a future episode.
Awesome.
Great, thank you.
Thank you guys.
Awesome. With that, we'll take a short break, and there will be another segment. I don't know which one, but there's going to be an awesome segment next, so stay tuned.